That night, nobody in the room understood what had just happened. Dean did, instantly. The showroom at the Sands was all light and noise a second earlier, brass punching out a bright riff, dice rattling faintly from the casino, glasses chiming, laughter rolling in waves off the darkened tables. The stage floated in a warm, golden haze, smoke curling lazily through the beams. Then, the picture tore. Two security men stepped out of the wings as if conjured, hands already reaching. They caught Sammy Davis Jr. mid-laugh, one on each arm, fingers digging into the shiny black sleeves of his jacket. The music stuttered, then cut. The room's roar collapsed into a stunned, lopsided silence. Sammy's body jerked backward, away from Dean. His polished shoe skidded on the slick edge of the stage, heel scraping, searching for balance. The microphone in his hand swung down, the cord snapping taut, giving a thin, ugly squeal through the speakers. For an instant, he looked less like the star everyone had paid to see, and more like any man hauled somewhere he hadn't chosen. In the first row, a woman froze with her cigarette halfway to her mouth, lipstick bright against her teeth. A man nearby shifted his chair too fast. Wood complained against the floor. Somewhere behind them, a spoon clinked once against china and stopped. The golden light didn't change, but it seemed colder. Sammy's smile died in pieces, not all at once. The show grin faded first. The smaller, private one lingered a heartbeat longer, as if refusing to believe this was real. His eyes went automatically to Dean, searching for the usual rescue line. The easy joke, the wink that turned every slight into a gag. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. His shoulders stayed square, chin level, breathing measured. The only giveaway was the tiny flare of his nostrils and the way his hand tightened around the microphone, tendons standing out against the dark skin. He knew exactly where he was and who was watching. Dignity was the last thing he owned outright in that room, and he held it like a shield. Dean stood 3 steps away, center stage, bathed in the same light. From the back of the house, he looked unchanged, tux neat, posture loose, the Rat Pack ease that never slipped. Up close, the mask had a crack. His fingers clamped the microphone stand hard enough to blanch the knuckles. The lazy tilt of his head stopped just short of its usual angle, arrested mid-gesture. His gaze dropped to the hands on Sammy's wrists. For a brief second, the crowd vanished. There was only that grip. White cuffs, dark skin, authority closing around it as if it had always owned the right. Their eyes met. Sammy, held between the two guards, turned his head just enough. The question there wasn't theatrical. It was simple, raw, and it burned. Are you really going to let this happen? Dean's answer for the moment was silence. A nervous chuckle escaped from somewhere near the bar, someone assuming this was some new bit. A couple in the center of the room kept eating their dessert, eyes studiously on their plates. In Vegas, minds learned early were not to look. At another table, a man leaned forward and whispered, "What the hell is this?" His companion hushed him without taking her gaze off the stage. Under the hush, the low hum of the sound system filled the room, an empty, static breath. It carried more than electricity. It carried rules, old, unwritten, understood by everyone who worked under those chandeliers. Rules about who could sit where, who could touch whom, who could be pulled away without anyone standing up. The guards dragged Sammy another step toward the wing. His shoe slipped again. One of them tightened his hold. Dean's foot shifted, half a step forward, almost nothing, but the gesture rippled through the room like a dropped stone. To see why he waited, why his jaw clenched before his tongue moved. You'd have to go back, beyond that spotlight, beyond that night, into conversations no audience ever heard. It hadn't begun with the grab on stage. That was only the moment when the truth finally ran out of places to hide. For years, the world had seen Dean and Sammy as a kind of magic act. Two friends who could turn any room into a living postcard of charm and rhythm. They laughed loud, shared spotlights, traded jokes so quick the crowd barely caught half of them. To audiences, it looked effortless. Off stage, it was a different map. Sammy had learned early which doors weren't built for him. Stage doors, yes. Front entrances, not always. Hotel lobbies sometimes. Casino floors, only under conditions spelled out quietly, never in writing. Dean had seen it all. Those tiny humiliations dressed up as house rules, those smiles from managers that were too wide not to be warnings. Once, after a late show, Sammy had been stopped from using the main corridor to the parking lot. Dean remembered the guard's tone, polite, apologetic, firm. "Sorry, sir, instructions." Sammy had lifted his hands, palms out, like surrender was an art he'd mastered. "No trouble. Just tell me which back alley I'm allowed tonight." He said it lightly, but his eyes told another story. Dean had dragged him through anyway, ignoring the guard's whispered protest, but he'd felt the eyes follow them, cold as the neon. In the weeks before the incident on stage, the pressure sharpened. One night, a casino manager pulled Dean aside near the green room. The hallway smelled of old carpet and fresh paint. "Listen," he murmured, adjusting his tie, though it didn't need adjusting. "We're getting comments from upstairs." "About what?" "You know what. A beat. Just keep things smooth. No surprises tonight." Dean stared at him. "You telling me who my friends can be?" "Dean," the man sighed, "we're telling you what keeps the room calm." The message wasn't new. The tone was. They weren't asking anymore. They were setting terms. Sammy knew it too. A few nights earlier, he'd shown up at the Sands unannounced, choosing a seat closer to the stage than the owners preferred. Not in the VIP bar, just close enough that certain men lifted their eyebrows. Dean had spotted the look passed from table to table, the silent judgment reserved for those who crossed invisible lines. Backstage, before the show that would break everything, their manager cornered Dean again. "You need to understand," he said quietly. "There's a list of expectations. Sammy's presence tonight is fine, as long as he stays where they want him. Don't invite him up. Don't bring him into the bit. The crowd's touchy." Dean's jaw had tightened. "Who's they?" "People who sign checks," the manager replied. "People we don't argue with." Dean had brushed past him without answering, but the words stuck like burrs. This wasn't about talent. It wasn't about show flow. It was about control, who had it and who didn't. And Sammy. He'd stopped playing along. He was tired. Tired of slipping through side doors, tired of smiling through insults, tired of pretending the stage erased the world outside it. That night, he chose the seat he wanted. Maybe out of pride, maybe out of defiance, maybe out of a lifetime's worth of swallowed answers. Dean had noticed him take that seat minutes before the house lights dimmed. He'd also noticed the owner turn his head, narrow his eyes, and tilt 2 fingers toward security. Just a small gesture, easy to miss, impossible to misinterpret. So when the guards moved, it wasn't confusion. It was execution of an unspoken order. On stage, Sammy's wrists were already in their hands. The crowd blinked, unsure. The guards pulled, steady and silent. And Dean, still at the microphone, could feel the trap around him tighten. He knew what defiance would cost, his contract, his standing, his show, maybe more. He also knew what his silence cost. The spotlight flickered faintly as Sammy was dragged another step. Dean's hand tightened around the mic stand. The manager's warning echoed back at him. "We don't argue with these people." But his friend's dignity was being hauled off stage like contraband. The seconds thickened, stretched. Dean inhaled once, slow and deep. The past fell away, and his voice finally rose to meet the moment. Dean drew breath, but the words caught behind his teeth. From his place at center stage, the showroom had narrowed to a single strip of reality. Sammy between those 2 suits, 1 foot dragging, 1 foot braced, the rest of the world blurred at the edges. The brass section, the velvet curtains, the tiers of tables, Everything shrank to that stumbling path toward the wings. He stepped toward the lip of the stage. The movement was small, but the room felt it. Chairs scraped. A rustle moved through the dark like wind and dry leaves. People straightened, sensing that the performance had slipped out of the usual groove. The guards slowed without quite stopping. They weren't show business. They were payroll. Their eyes flicked from Sammy to Dean, to somewhere over the crowd, looking for a signal that wasn't coming fast enough. Out in the half-light, a manager at one of the better tables lifted his hand. Earlier, that same hand had sent the order. Now, the gesture was different. Palm down, fingers pressing the air, as if to say, "Easy, not too far." It didn't match the instruction Dean had heard in the hallway. It didn't match what the men on stage were already doing. Dean's thoughts came in short, sharp flashes, not noble, not tidy. They're manhandling him in front of my name. How far are they willing to push? How long am I willing to stand here and watch? The mic felt heavier than it ever had. He could feel the fine tremor in the stand where his hand gripped it. His throat was dry in a way whiskey never caused. Behind him, a sax player raised his instrument halfway, as if he could drown the scene in sound. Then he froze, bell hovering, uncertain whether covering it up would make things better or worse. An usher in the side aisle quietly backed into a doorway, wanting no part of whatever line might be crossed next. A couple near the front eased their chairs just out of the direct sight line, the way people do when they sense trouble but don't yet know its size. Sammy jerked his arm, not enough to break free, just enough to twist his body. One guard hissed to the other, low, hurried. "Not like that. We weren't told to rough him up." The words were meant to stay between them. Sammy heard. Dean almost did. The intent was clear even without every syllable. At the owner's table, the man in charge shifted his posture, shoulders angling, jaw tightening. His eyes moved from the struggling trio to Dean. The new hand motion was smaller this time, almost reluctant. The order had changed. Dial it back. But momentum is a stubborn thing. The guard's grip had already turned the whole room into a witness. Sammy's heel found purchase. For a second, he planted both feet and stopped moving altogether. He turned his head fully now, meeting Dean's stare head-on. The plea was gone. What sat there instead was something harder. A tired question. So, the murmur in the audience thickened, no longer mistakable for laughter. A woman near the bar said under her breath, "They can't just do that." And for the first time, a few heads around her nodded instead of shrugging. Dean took another step. The boards creaked faintly under his shoe, a sound most nights lost beneath drums and horns. Tonight, it carried. He was standing between two worlds now, the safe script that paid the bills, and the bare fact of a friend being dragged away because someone in an office didn't like where he sat. One sentence from him could pull the whole evening off its rails. One more second of silence would nail him to the side he hated. The guards were 3 strides from the wing. Sammy's breath came faster, chest rising and falling under the tight jacket, but his chin stayed level. Dean tilted the microphone away from his mouth, then back again. Everyone in the showroom, from the cheapest seat to the highest table, understood something at the same time. Whatever happened next would not be a joke, not a bit, not an accident. They might have wished for the moment to pass quietly, for the song to start up and the plates to keep clattering. But the chance for that had slipped away. The air itself felt braced, waiting for a single voice to break it. The sound system gave out a low, uneasy hum, as if even the wires knew something was about to snap. The laughter was gone. Glasses hovered midway to mouths. Dealers in the back doorway forgot to blink. There was only the strip of stage between Dean and the guards, bright as a trial bench, and Sammy pinned in that harsh light. Dean lifted the microphone from its stand. For a heartbeat, everyone thought he was about to sing, to turn it all into a routine. Instead, he bent and set the mic down on the floor. The thud of metal on wood was small, but the speakers caught it and sent it back over the crowd, a dull final knock that echoed through every corner of the room. No orchestra hit, no rim shot, just that single, undecorated sound. On the sand stage, a singer without a microphone wasn't part of the show anymore. Both guards froze. They'd dragged men out of shows before, but never with the headliner stepping away from his own tools like that. One of them loosened his grip without meaning to. The other's jaw clenched. He stared at Dean as if waiting for someone, anyone, to tell him how far his authority reached. Sammy felt the shift and whispered hoarse, "Dean, don't put yourself in this." It wasn't pleading to be rescued. It was warning him away from the same wall he'd been hitting all his life. Dean straightened. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that a lesser crowd would have missed it. This one didn't. The sound system, still live, caught every word. "Take your hands off him," he said, "or you can explain to the whole country why your star can't sing in this room tomorrow." No flourish, no joke. Just plain language, aimed not at the men in cheap cologne, but at whoever sat behind them counting profits and headlines. For a split second, nothing moved. Then the fallout began. A chair scraped violently near the owner's table. The man there started to rise, stopped, realized how many eyes were already on him, and sank back down with his knuckles pressed flat against the linen. The manager halfway across the room half lifted his arm, some protest catching in his throat and dying there. Up on stage, the equation changed. If the guards hauled Sammy out now, they weren't just enforcing house rules. They were dragging a man away in direct defiance of the name on the marquee. If they backed down, they were crossing whoever had given the order in the first place. One of them swallowed hard. The other let his fingers uncurl from Sammy's sleeve. The grip broke. Sammy's arms dropped to his sides. For a moment, he didn't move, as if making sure this wasn't some trick of adrenaline. Then, slowly, he straightened his jacket, the gesture precise, almost ceremonial. The spotlight tightened on Dean without anyone calling for it, a hard white circle on his face. Lines the crowd never saw from the back rows were suddenly visible. Fatigue, anger, something like relief. Beside him in the same light, Sammy stood no longer as cargo being removed, but as a man deciding whether to stay. No one clapped. The silence was too taut for that. You could hear the faint click of a music stand settling, the soft exhale of someone who'd been holding air too long. Somewhere behind the glow, in the dark where the real power sat, minds were already tallying costs. A call to be made later. A term to be renegotiated. A debt written in a different kind of ink. On stage, it was just two men looking at each other. Dean's eyes said, "I'm here, I chose." Sammy's answered, "You have no idea what that choice will buy you. Or what it'll charge." The night might still have slid back into routine. Another joke, another tune, the audience deciding they'd imagined the whole thing. But that single order, spoken into live microphones under casino lights, had pushed the evening past any safe border. The show would go on. The city would keep spinning. Yet from that moment, every laugh, every note, every step they took together would be standing on ground that had quietly cracked open beneath them. And the people who'd given the orders that night were about to learn that dragging one man off stage could pull much more than they intended out into the light.